We are delighted to welcome this year's Sachs Family Scholar in Residence, Rabbi Rachel Adler. She is the David Ellenson Professor of Modern Jewish Thought and Feminist Studies at Hebrew Union College in LA. She holds a PhD in Religion and Social Ethics from the University of Southern California, fight on, with a conjoint certificate in Judaica from Hebrew Union College, an MA in English Literature from Northwestern, and a master's degree in social work from the University of Minnesota. She was ordained as a rabbi by Hebrew Union College in spring of 2012. Dr. Adler was one of the first theologian and ethicists to integrate feminist perspectives and concerns into the interpretation of Jewish texts and the renewal of Jewish law and ethics. Her essay, The Jew Who Wasn't There, published in 1971, is generally considered the first piece of Jewish feminist theology and ethics. She's the author of Engendering Judaism, the first work by a female theologian to win the National Jewish Book Award in the category of Jewish thought. She's also the author of numerous articles about theology, ethics, Jewish law, and gender. Her forthcoming books, there's only 3, include Pour Out Your Heart Like Water, Jewish Perspectives on Suffering. She's co-editing an anthology tentatively titled Gender and Jewish Thought, Theology and Ethics, and my favorite, Tales of the Holy Mysticat. Her topic for this evening is Jews of all genders talking their way into the Jewish conversation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Adler.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Is this working? Well, good. I'm very honored to be the Sachs Family Scholar for this year. And delighted to be with some old friends and one of my favorite students. Jewish tradition is often compared to a vast conversation among many voices. Our Bible is not a single book by a single author, but an assortment of texts in different genres by different schools or of authors. Talmud and Midrash are not like Western books where the voice of a single author determines the perspective. Instead, diverse voices present a mosaic of legal debates, case law, stories, philosophies, proverbs, and prayers. Even codes and responsa, philosophies and theologies, which do have a single authorial voice, are contributions to communal discourses among passionately interested parties. Yet almost always, the voices have been of elite, presumably heterosexual males. For a long time, the conversationalists ignored other Jews whispering on the periphery. Women, both straight and lesbian, gay men, bisexuals, transsexuals, Jews of color. Only in the last 40 years or so have these new voices begun to talk their way in. So how do newcomers join a conversation whose past topics, language, and categories were framed by interests and experiences other than their own? How will their inclusion change future conversations? How does their inclusion shed new light on the meanings of old stories and old arguments? Talking one's way in cannot be accomplished merely by gate crashing. Becoming a permanent partner in an ongoing conversation requires a reciprocal process. To join the conversation of Jewish tradition, new participants need to learn the language. But veteran members need to do some learning too. They cannot expect newcomers to shed their own unique perspectives and experiences and swap them for ones the tradition already reflects. They must be welcomed as the people they really are. The tradition must allow itself to be challenged by the new categories and experiences they bring. They may require really serious rethinking of ideas and assumptions the tradition used to take for granted. It is not easy, and for a while, both the decibel level and the anxiety level are high. The veteran members think, this is going to kill us and destroy the whole conversation. The new folks think, what did I need this for? Why don't I just walk away? But if they persist, they revitalize the conversation for all the participants. And that is how traditions stay alive. I've been saying that a tradition is not a set of books or a set of rules. A tradition is a conversation, even a bit of a fight. The philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre describes a living tradition as a long-term, socially embodied argument about the goods that constitute that tradition. Let's unpack that a little. MacIntyre explains, a living tradition is a socially embodied argument because there are real people living out the various positions in the argument. When he talks about the goods that constitute the tradition, MacIntyre means what the tradition cares about. So in the Jewish tradition, some of the arguments would be about how to live a good life, or what is kvod habriot, human dignity, and how can we uphold it? What is shalom? All these are the goods of our tradition. A question feminist and queer Jews bring to this argument is whether preferring one gender over others or viewing one gender as the norm from which other genders somehow deviate honors the divine image in all of us and promotes justice. Current halacha is dumbfounded by this question. Indeed, liberal Judaisms too are still struggling with the concepts, and that is potentially growth-inducing for everybody. A tradition is fluid if it's alive. The conversation twists and turns, finding new topics and new ways of arguing. But all the participants share some basic vocabulary and a sense of participating in shared narratives. As MacIntyre says, I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can answer the prior question of what story or stories do I find myself a part? Commitments emerge out of stories and are refashioned in stories. I do certain things because I view myself as the daughter of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. I do other things because I view myself as the inheritor of the conflicts voiced by those Talmudic subversives, Beruria and Yalta. I do yet other things because this is the way Sadie Hellman would expect her granddaughter to behave. We learn these larger narratives that include us and hence make demands on us in the conversational community that transmits and reshapes the tradition. We also learn and transmit the stories that underlie the narratives of our own life experiences in our families, both families of origin and families we have chosen. My goal as a feminist Jew and as a theologian and rabbi is to integrate my two sets of stories so that they're not at war with one another. Because if the stories of the tradition and the stories of who I am as a whole person are at war with one another, how can I live? The issues that both Jewish feminists and Jewish queer theorists bring to the conversation of tradition have far-reaching implications for redistributions of social power and religious authority and leadership. They require of all of us reevaluations of law and practice, of canon, of how to interpret texts, reevaluating the texts and practices of the past and rediscovering pieces of the past that were buried or ignored require us to employ a major principle of feminist hermeneutics, and that is pay attention not only to what is there, but to what isn't there. Both are significant. How then do new conversation partners affect the tradition through storytelling? There are two ways. One way is to tell the tradition its own stories in a way it never understood them before. Many feminist scholars do that, including me. The Ashkenazi Weiss Torah commentary, which I hope you have available to you, does that. Andrew Raymer does it in his book, Queering the Text. The second way is to tell stories the tradition doesn't know at all. Examples of this second way include Sandy Simcha Dubowski's documentary, Trembling Before God, about gay and lesbian members of Orthodox communities, Leah Lax's memoir, Uncovered, about her experiences as a woman and a deeply closeted lesbian in a Chabad community, and the Me Too experiences of innumerable Jewish women, which are shaking up law, ethics, and policy in all the denominations of Judaism. Why invest in a difficult and profoundly disturbing process with some partners who may be different from us? Because every Jew has a portion in the Torah that only he or she knows and can share. If we do not teach it, that portion of Torah will be lost, and without it, truth will be diminished, and the fullness of the unfolding oral Torah will be impaired. We need each other. May we come to revere each other as our teachers who open to us the way to God's truth. Shabbat Shalom.